This video was brought to you by the lovely members of my Patreon.
I don't know if we'll ever get there. But I guess I want to be wrong. I want to watch this video back in 30 years and be like, oh, Kat, you were so wrong. I want to be able to say that, but I'm not that optimistic. Hey guys, it's Kat and it's time for yet another episode of True Tea. I wanted to thank you guys so much for joining me here for yet another episode of True Tea. If you are brand new to this channel, first of all, welcome. Thank you for clicking on this video. This channel is all about learning, sharing, and growing through education and conversation, and this is the conversation segment. This is where I encourage people to sort of come and share their most raw, real feelings, whether you're right, whether you're wrong, either way, you're honest. That's what True Tea is all about. Just giving me your real brew. It's about thoughtful conversations in the comment section of this video. Really just about having productive conversations that lead to an understanding of some sort. We all have various different perspectives. We all have various different experiences. And I just want to say that I really gained quite a bit from reading your guys' comments. And I know that my followers on this channel really also gain a lot from reading your guys' comments. You guys left some really great comments on my last video. And I appreciate those of you guys who leave comments that kind of go along the lines of, I have, someone like last week wrote pretty bluntly, I'm transphobic and I'm watching your videos because I don't want to be. And honestly, that's why I'm here. That's why we're making these videos. So if you are interested in having these sorts of conversations, getting these sorts of videos in your feed, I would highly suggest that you subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can get these videos every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, we're gonna be having a conversation about what exactly transgender acceptance is. But before we do, I would highly suggest that you go to your kitchen and grab yourself something to drink. Now, I am drinking, I don't even know what kind of wine this is. It is some good old fashioned goon vibes. I only drink the most fanciest, of alcohol. Whenever you guys see me drinking wine, it's usually because I'm going somewhere. In LA, I'm trying to, be frugal. And so I do like a bit of pre-partying with some boxed wine. And then, I go and I buy a drink at the bar, and I'm going to an event after this. And, it's a drinking bar event. So, I want to be a little tipsy. I want to walk in a little tipsy. I'm the sort of person who, I think I become more aware of my body and how I'm holding myself when I'm drunk. So yeah, I guess that just sounds like an excuse for my alcoholism, but either way, it is what it is. So anyway, I'm gonna take a big gulp of this wine and then we're gonna get right into this video. In the past couple of videos, I've talked to you guys about transgender acceptance. They've all kind of been about that. And one of the things I mentioned is that most people in this world will not accept transgender people. But honestly, I guess I really don't have a very particular idea of what acceptance is. And so I wanted to share my thoughts on what acceptance would look like, as a transgender person. And these are things that I think I haven't necessarily thought about in the most complete way. So this is gonna be a stream of consciousness video, but I wanted to kind of talk about this because I think when I say something like we're never gonna be accepted, I guess I do have some specific ideas of what acceptance looks like. And I know that those might not be what people initially or always assume that acceptance is, right? And I know that acceptance is different for everyone. So as I just start out almost every video, I feel like it's so important for me to talk about what my life is. And I always have these sort of preambles, because I don't expect everyone who's watching this video to have watched my other videos. So I like to preface most of my conversations with this because I just think it's ethical for me to do that. Like I said in previous videos, I come to YouTube to have these conversations out of, honestly, this sort of feeling of, I don't know how to even phrase it. I live a life right now where I don't currently really deal with a lot of the obstacles that I discuss when I discuss what transphobia is for transgender people. I am not somebody who goes through life with having their gender questioned or having their gender challenged. I'm somebody who enters the vast majority of spaces being accepted as a woman. I never really have to have a debate about that. It's generally something that I don't have to really navigate around. I have passing privilege. And so to be honest with you guys, my life is one where I don't often find myself I guess, fighting through a lot of these transphobic things in the way that a lot of people who talk about transness online are, which is part of the reason why I wanted to sort of talk about this stuff, because even though that's my life, I feel driven to still talk about the stuff that I've been through. Some of you guys will notice that when I talk about my previous experiences, I mostly talk about, really what's just like a 4-year span of my life. I transitioned, in 2006, 2020 right now. And I talk mostly about my experiences in college, because when I was experiencing a lot of the growing pains of trans life, that's when I was experiencing them. But there's not as many experiences today as I used to have, right? So that all being said, if I were to base our current state of trans acceptance on my own experiences, right? I would say to you guys that transgender people are generally accepted, because I don't usually go through life fighting to have my gender embraced. I'm somebody who, after I changed my gender marker, after I changed my name, it was almost like these conversations that I used to have all the time about being transgender, what my pronouns were, what my name was, they evaporated completely, which was a very weird place for me to be, because I didn't envision, I started my transition from like a very sort of radical queer perspective where these conversations were very, very important. Then I changed my gender marker and I changed my name, and suddenly, unexpectedly, these just weren't conversations I was having anymore, right? And then after that, I started to fall into stealth, and then I started living this life where people around me just didn't know, and I was, not only did they not know, but I was really, really, really terrified of them finding out, right? But that's, when I look at like what the reality of my experiences is though, I say I've had this easy life right now, I don't deal with these things, but why is that? Why is it that I currently don't necessarily go through life feeling unaccepted as a transgender person? Well, I mean, it's simply because of the way that I look, the way that I carry myself, my gender expression, and my gender identity. I'm a very binary trans girl. I have a very typical feminine gender expression that is not something that is contrived, but what I look like is very much informed by cis sexism. It's very much informed by these very narrow standards of what a man is supposed to look like and what a woman is supposed to look like. It's really informed by, these frankly very narrow sort of ideas of gender that I fit into for sure, but I find are oppressive generally to transgender people. So I can't really come on here and say, well, I'm accepted, so there's no big deal. If everyone lived like me, transgender acceptance would just be what it is. If you dress like me, if you pass like me, if you tried like me, if you lived like me, if you took hormones as long as I've taken hormones, your life would just be better, right? Because while that might be true, while it might be true that yes, transgender people will be more accepted if they pass, if they want to pass, if they look cis, and if they want, do all these things, well, that to some degree is true. It shouldn't be, right? And so when I make the work on here and I talk about the stuff that I'm talking about on here, I'm not talking about, acceptance in terms of me being accepted. I'm not talking about acceptance in terms of, I need to get mine and then I'm gonna, fuck everyone else. I'm talking about it in the context of larger transgender acceptance for everyone, which is why, while I might not understand various different gender identities, while I might not necessarily understand, various ideas that other people have about gender, I will always be a person who says, you know what, these people who have different genders than I do, they're valid because of this, this, and that, because I don't think that liberation for transgender people means I get accepted and no one else, right? Now, in my previous video, I talked about how a lot of people will pantomime acceptance. I've talked about how, you have these people who you go to school with, who you work with, who, yeah, they'll call you your pronoun, yeah, they'll say your name, but they're not really accepting you, right? They're not truly seeing you as who you are, really. One of the fucked up things that comes with passing is that I've been in so many situations where a transgender person is part of our social circle, a transgender person is part of our group, right? And the moment that they leave, right, the cis person that I'm talking to, who knows the transgender person who entered the conversation or tried to enter the conversation, the moment they leave, they're misgendering them, they're dead naming them, they're, arguing, I've had so many weird conversations about, yeah, no, so-and-so goes by they pronouns, but like, I just don't really, it's really hard for me, or I don't really agree with it, da-da-da-da. But so many really uncomfortable conversations like that. And it's even more uncomfortable when I've had those conversations with people who are talking about their partners, people that they're dating. And so one of my bits of pessimism, right, when I talk about how I don't believe that transgender people will ever be accepted, or, well, I don't say that, I mean, I think that when I say most transgender people won't be accepted, right? I don't know about ever, but we'll get into that later. But when I say that I don't believe that, most people accept transgender people, it's because I see stuff like that, where you have these people who have just learned the right script. They've just learned the right thing to say. They've just learned the right way to pantomime acceptance to your face. But when it comes to how they actually feel, when it comes to how they hold you internally in your mind, you aren't who you say you are. You aren't who you actually present yourself to be. You will always be this person that they've decided you are. Doesn't matter how long you've been who you are. Doesn't matter how long you've transitioned. There are people who, to your perspective, like you might know people right now who are using the right pronouns, who are using the right name, all the da-da-da to your face. But the moment that you're away from them, they're misgendering you. They're arguing against why your gender is valid. And that's what makes me feel very uneasy. Because what I think that is, at bare minimum, is tolerance, right? Is tolerance. People have learned how to, be tolerant to transgender people. And one of the things, the last video I uploaded, I think it was 26 minutes long. It was actually 50 minutes of footage. I edited it a lot. But one of the things I said that I edited it out was, I guess in so many ways, it's not that bad, right, for you to interact with people and have them, call you the right name and call you the right pronoun, even though they might not internally agree. I mean, I think for most transgender people, right, if your interaction with a person who doesn't agree with you is them using the right pronoun, using the right name, that's a net positive. You know what I mean? That's a positive thing. It's not a negative thing that they called you the right pronoun, right? But what I sort of sat with is how people are often just looking directly through a transgender person, how they're often looking through the person's gender to find the person that they really want to see, and that's who they're interacting with, not so much you as a person, right? Not so much you as you currently are. And, for me, it's very odd because I transitioned so long ago that the man that people imagine me being does not exist. You're not going to find pictures of me as a man. You're not going to find pictures of me with a beard or facial hair of any sort of type. You're not going to find pictures of me pantomiming what you imagine to be typical masculinity. I never matured into that. I transitioned so young that this is who I know. This is who I am, right? And it is sort of weird sometimes to have these weird, insidious conversations with people where they're not engaging with you. They're trying to look through you to find the person who they imagine you to truly be. Because to some people, you will never truly be who you say you are, right? So what acceptance looks like for me, what I mentioned in my last video is that what people I think don't quite understand about a lot of transgender people, because I think the way that the media has portrayed it, and there's a lot of conversations to be had about the media. There are so many conversations to be had about the media, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but one of the things I wish I sort of reiterated or talked a bit more about in that video is that the media will do this thing, they will produce what seems like trans positive content to some of you guys, but what it actually is exploitation. I've personally known people who have gone and done documentaries with, people like not Broadband, there's Barcraft, I don't know. They've asked me to be in videos, right? I know people who have been in videos like that, right? The way they thought the story was gonna be and the way that it was presented and framed, super, super different. Super, super different, right? You have people who are very invested in getting clicks and views by sharing transgender stories. So as a cis person clicking through, you think, oh my gosh, I see all these transgender stories. Why am I being, reminded of this? But when you go through, go to any trans video on Barcraft's channel, read the comments of that video. The vast majority of them are arguing against the person in the video existing and being valid. The vast, vast, vast majority of them. Because what a lot of you guys don't understand is that while this media is produced to be positive, while this media is produced to seem accepting, they're actually just doing a freak show. This is actually just them, right? Having these weird trans people, or having people they think are weird, come onto camera, be in front of them, and be the freak show that you click on. And I'm not saying that there aren't positive things that come out of some of these documentaries, there definitely is. But what I'm trying to say is that what people don't get is that very few people are truly invested in honest transgender media. Very, 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 very few. Very few. You know what? Look, you know what? I don't want to get too much in the media. That's a whole other video. But basically what I'm saying is that there are you shouldn't necessarily take these conversations being more common as a sign that people actually accept and agree with transgender people, because that's not necessarily the case. It's a popular conversation on social media. It will get clicks from people who hate trans people, clicks from people who love transgender people. And what it actually does for the transgender community does not matter. Again, I'm saying this as somebody who has been doing this for a very long time, somebody who has made this content for a very long time. That's the reality of it. But anyway, one of the things I mentioned in my previous video is that the vast majority of people who are transgender do not, while it may seem like you're hearing about all this stuff and transgender people are being pushy and putting it on, what the reality is that most transgender people would like to live a life where their transness is not the most important thing in every conversation, every social interaction they have. Most transgender people want to be able to navigate through the world, not having to feel like they're forced to talk about them being transgender. It's so funny, right? I talked about how after I changed my gender marker in my name, my life sort of changed and I was no longer having some certain conversations. And the reason why that was so jarring to me was that I finally kind of reached this point where I no longer had to be defensive. I was no longer sending messages to my teachers. I was no longer sending messages to my employers, being like, hey, this is who I am. This is why my paperwork is da-da-da-da, and having to sort of justify myself. And, I was no longer doing that. And I suddenly could just live. I suddenly could just live. Because while transness is a part of a lot of transgender people's lives, it's not all there is. I'm also an illustrator. I'm also a creative. I make a lot of work, even though we've recently been talking a lot about transgender shit. Most of my stuff for a very long time didn't reference my transness, right? Because that's, while I'm talking about it and it's passionate for me right now, it's not one of the most important things for me to talk about, right? I have things that I care a little bit more about, right? And so, it was so interesting to finally be at a point in life where this just wasn't an important thing to discuss in the way that it used to be. It was almost jarring, but it was also so freeing, right? Where instead of talking about me being trans, in a job application and that being something that almost immediately disqualified me, it was suddenly now about what I can do. Can you do the work? Can you do this? Can you do that? Do you have these qualifications, those qualifications? And just reaching that point is so freeing and so amazing. So most transgender people don't want for this to be a thing they're always talking about, right? So I guess when I think about what acceptance for transgender people looks like, I think it looks like that. I think it looks like transgender people living in a society that doesn't force them to constantly have to feel like every interaction they have needs to be underlined and reinforced by their transness, right? But what does that really look like, I think that transgender people will be accepted, right, when we place less of an emphasis on gender in society. And I think even outside of these conversations, we have a very long way to go before something like that is even realistic. Do you know what I mean? As it stands, the reason why binary transgender people, manage to go through society so easily is because they're assimilating into one of the two available options, right? Now, I'm very aware that passing privilege is a sort of shaky, sort of superficial privilege, because once people do know that I'm transgender, they change. People change in the way that they're treating me. And in some ways, because they know that I'm transgender, they might treat me a lot worse. The thing is too, in the future, here's how I envision the idealized world, right? I envision a world where we understand that there are different types of people, right? That the only people who exist in this world are not just cisgender people, where we understand that not all women are cis, where we understand that some of them might be transgender, and that's not a good or a bad thing. It just is, do you know what I mean? Where those differences are acknowledged, but they're not used against us. They're not used as a negative thing. They're not used as a validation to prevent us from housing, prevent us from working in certain places, preventing us from going to certain schools, where it's not an obstacle, right? Where transgender people can just, this is who I am, without having to be a constant conversation, right? And the fact that we're still having these conversations where we're having to qualify each other's genders, we're having to justify each other's genders, we're having to justify our own genders, to me, that just says we have so much more to go. You know, here's the thing. My gender is one of the most basic aspects of who I am. One of the most basic aspects of who I am. It's like my name, it's like my height, it's like the color of my skin, right? It is one of the most basic aspects of who I am. Having to go through a certain period of time in my life where I'm having to qualify that or justify that or clarify that, it's incredibly rough. It's incredibly rough, right? It's really, 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 really hard to feel like what is such a basic part of who you are needs a consensus. You know, consensus is required before that thing becomes true. And I guess acceptance would look like people not having to require that consensus. And the thing that I always think about when we talk about this stuff is, you know, we'll have a lot of conversations and debates in society about this. We're gonna continue to talk about this. We're gonna continue to talk about, you know, okay, is this right? Is that right? Is this valid? Is that valid? But what I keep thinking about is either way, transgender people have to, time continues on, right? Time continues on. Time is not going to stop for us to figure out these discourses and then figure out where transgender people fit into society and go from there. No, time is going to continue to go on, and transgender people have to sort of figure out where they factor into society. The reason why I really do advocate and support and defend specifically non-binary people, specifically people who don't pass or don't want to pass, is because I truly believe that once we start accepting people like that, transgender people in general will be more accepted, you know? We have so many conversations where people think that transgender acceptance is, you know, transgender people beating you over the head and saying, accept me or die, you know what I mean? Like, and it's really more like people just, I think acceptance would look like people just allowing people to be who they are without holding it against them, without preventing them from being able to exist, right? You know, for me, I've been having these conversations for so long, and while I think we have gotten, there's some ways in which we've gotten better, there's some ways in which we've gotten worse. I think transgender acceptance is better now than it was when I, you know, first recognized that I was trans. So I'll say that, right? But frankly, things are still so baby steps. Things are still so baby steps, right? So while I may feel like acceptance has gotten better, maybe there are other people who feel the complete opposite way, right? Because they're being scrutinized, their gender is being scrutinized in a way that mine isn't, right? And I don't think that we can continue to say that, you know, transgender acceptance has just gotten so far, has gone, you know, has done so well, when those people still feel that way. When those people still feel like they're not being accepted, that people are always trying to, you know, fight against their gender and, you know, dismiss their gender. Am I making sense? I mean, I don't know if I'm making sense. Let me take another swig of wine. Maybe I'll make a little bit more sense, right? But I guess for me, acceptance looks like that. Acceptance looks like a transgender person not having to defend themselves at every single end. I would like for that to be the case for all transgender people. I would like for all transgender people to be able to live a life where they're not having to qualify and justify themselves all the time, where they can go to school and not have to worry about being misgendered because of what their birth certificate says, you know, where they can say, hey, this is my name, these are my pronouns, please respect that, and just have that be something that is understood and respected. Put it in the records, have the teachers understand it, and have that be respected. I would love for that to be, that for me would be what acceptance is, right? And I feel like we won't necessarily get there because it would require too much. If there's one thing that I've learned from, listen, I've produced easy to understand, accessible transgender education for over a decade. And I'm not the only one, okay? I'm one of literally thousands of transgender people who have understood that they're going to be misunderstood, who have taken their resources, taken their time, their energy, their talent, and translated it into creating, content for cis people that hopefully cis people can watch and understand, or listen to, or read and understand, you know what I mean? But what I've recognized is that the vast majority of people will never care enough to look at this content, which is why I feel how I feel. I feel how I feel because it blows my mind that we live in a time where transgender people can document their entire transitions, right? But cis people will act like, well, there's just not enough information out there. There's just not enough information out there. Like, transgender people can on one hand produce entire web series about their personal transition, right? But on the other hand, they're not doing enough to help cis people understand or be educated, right? Because I'm so intimately connected to all of these conversations, because I know so many people who have done this stuff, who have created this stuff and have done it so passionately for years, screaming into a void, hoping that people will get to that point where maybe I discuss where we are all accepted, right? Because I've done that, because I've seen that, I have a really hard time being optimistic for transgender acceptance at large. Listen, clearly I'm here for a reason. Clearly I'm having these conversations because I know there are people out there who do want to listen, who do want to change. And I want to thank you for watching these videos and for sticking with me and for having an open mind and for trying to, address maybe some of the internalized things that you personally have gone through. Thank you so much for doing that. But what I'm saying is that you are in the minority. You are in the minority. You are not the average person. And I would love for you to be, but you're not, And that's why I have the pessimism that I do, And where does that leave transgender people? For me, like I said, one of the things that's so interesting to me about these conversations is that we sit along and we debate about this, and we talk about this, and we go through all of these weird sort of like philosophical conversations about the validity of our genders, right? But as we talk about those things, time goes on. Time goes on. And transgender people can't afford to exist in the bubble of the internet. They can't. They have to interact with the real world. And so while we're having all these conversations, while we're doing all this stuff, there are actual transgender people who are suffering right now, who are struggling right now, because they're not being accepted in their communities. And I want things to get better. I want things to get better. But I don't know. Maybe I want to be wrong, guys. I want to be wrong. Like, whenever I say that transgender people, I don't believe that transgender people will ever be fully accepted. Like, I don't want for that to be a truism. I would love to be 60 years old on this damn channel, because by then I'll have this channel will be a prepping channel, of course. I would like to be 60 years old, with my little post-apocalyptic prepper channel, living in a society where gender is just not a big fucking deal, where gender isn't a big deal, where people are like, whatever, it's, who cares? And everyone gets to just be who they fucking want to be, because that's what the interesting thing about seeing a lot of these conversations happen and a lot of this stuff change is I'm seeing more people be who the fuck they want to be. That's where you get a lot of these non-binary folks. You get a lot of these people who they recognize, from some conversations they have with themselves that, this is me. I'm tired of pretending to be somebody I'm not. This is me. And I think that's fucking punk and badass, just to be able to say, this is who I am without needing to live in this weird, unhappy space where you can't quite put a word to why you feel so uncomfortable, why you feel so limited, right? I think that we in general would be so much happier if we let go of wielding these narrow sort of ideas and concepts as weapons against each other, right? Listen, my feminism is all about pushing ourselves away from gendered oppression, right? I would love for us to get to a point where we stop looking at gender as something that is a make or a break, is a value system, right? Anyway, I don't know if we'll ever get there. I don't know if we'll ever get there. But you know, I guess I want to be wrong. I want to watch this video back in 30 years and be like, oh, Kat, you were so wrong. I want to be able to say that, but I'm not that optimistic. Anyway, I'm very, very curious what acceptance looks like for you as a transgender person. What does acceptance look like for you? I don't know if my vision of acceptance is the right one or is the one that makes sense. I don't really know, but I know that it's kind of, when I think of what acceptance would be, I guess it's what I imagine. I do imagine acceptance for a trans person being us never having to really have as much focus on it, you know, us not having to fight against our paperwork and things like that, right? But I'm curious what it would look like for you. How would you go from being a little baby, a genderless baby, ideally, to being a person, like in your ideal world, how would we go through all these things? How would we avoid all of the frustrating conventions that we experience as transgender people? I would love for you to share that in the comment section. I'm really looking forward to reading those comments because I don't even know if I have the answers. I definitely don't. So yeah. Anyway, if you managed to watch this entire video, first of all, it's very long, so thank you for that. Put this emoji in the comment section. I appreciate those of you guys who put the emojis in. And by the way, if you can't put this emoji in, if you're like on desktop, you can copy and paste other people's emojis. Sometimes when you like select it, it won't quite seem like it's selected, but you can copy and paste people's emojis. It's kind of great, honestly. So yeah. Anyway, on that note, I will see you guys next week. Right now, you are looking at 2 videos you can watch if you would like to continue to sip true tea right here on the channel. In the bottom corner, you have my PO box where you guys can send me things if you would like to. I love packages, could use some extra tea. And also right there are several ways you can send me a tip if that's something you want. You know, if you want to give me the tip, I'll be very receptive, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.